Hey everyone, Bianca Lotus Theory Designs. Let's talk about how I gave this vintage jewelry box a makeover. After I cleaned my piece and gave it a scuff sanding, I began the makeover process by starting with WoodUbend Moldings. WoodUbend Moldings are appliques that are heatable, bendable, and can be customized to your liking. You'll see that I'm using a heat gun to warm my moldings up. This makes them flexible, therefore they can form to the surface. Once warm, I was able to cut a piece of the trim off to use for the stem of my flowers. Using Titebond wood glue, I generously spread the glue along the base of the molding and then applied it to the base of my piece. As I secure the molding to my piece, I also bend it so that it takes on the shape that I want it to. I do this by keeping it warm and using the heat gun as I see necessary. I use the same process to secure a rosebud to the end of my trim piece. Once that's on there, I was able to move forward with a longer trim piece, therefore creating a longer stem that trails up from the base of the piece up to the top. Again, as I work with the moldings, I am sure to keep the heat on. When WoodUbend moldings cool, they stay in the shape that they are in, so it is important to keep heat on them as you go. Once my rosebuds were laid, I was able to move on to the paint. Off camera, I started by laying 2 coats of chocolate as my base coat. From there, I begin to create a stippled blend using 3 colors. We have tea rose, we have terracotta, and soon I will introduce aubergine into the mix. Stippling is one of my favorite blending techniques to use. I am dipping my brush into my colors, adding a tiny amount of paint, and then tapping it on to the substrate of my piece. Once I had the top of my piece almost covered, I spritzed a little bit of water onto the paint. Doing this keeps the paint wet enough for me to be able to blend, as you see I begin doing here. Using Dixie Belle's new Best Staying brush, I am able to softly blend the stippled paint together using a swirling motion and light pressure. That purple color you see, that's the aubergine that I said that we would introduce. I felt the base needed something more, and so adding this purple really brought to life my base canvas. I am going to repeat this process for the sides of the jewelry box. Watch as I continue the process. As much as I liked the base, I felt it still needed something. I reached for Dixie Belle's Plum Crazy and added a bit of this beautiful pink to the side of the jewelry box. To do this, I waited for the base to dry, maybe about 15 minutes. I did not want to risk reactivating the paint underneath when I added the pink. You'll notice I stipple on a little bit of the pink, and using that same Best Staying brush that I was using earlier to blend, I come in, spritz some water, and blend that in as well. I only did this to 2 of the sides. I did not want to overwhelm the piece with the pink. Once I had my canvas painted, I was able to start with the embellishment process. Let's start with one of Dixie Belle's new silkscreen stencils, Butterflies. Silkscreen stencils are awesome because they have a mesh lining where the design cutout is, therefore reducing, and in most cases eliminating, bleed underneath the stencil from your paint. They also feature a sticky back, which keeps your stencil from moving, therefore giving you clean, crisp designs. I laid my stencil down in the place that I wanted it and used tape to isolate the design that I wanted to apply. I am using a round foam brush to put the paint onto the stencil. As I do this, I am pressing on the brush to make sure that I am able to penetrate the mesh with my paint. Once I have achieved the desired coverage, I remove the stencil. Next, using chocolate, I am able to use an artist brush and paint the stems of my roses. I try not to load my brush up with too much paint when I do this. I don't want my paint to bleed onto my painted canvas. Once I was done painting the stems, I was able to move forward on my rosebuds. The color I use to paint the rosebuds is a custom mix of tea rose and aubergine. Combining these 2 colors allowed me to achieve a beautiful shade of lavender. Again, using an artist brush, I paint the rosebuds with this color. Next, I add leaves to my roses. I am using a one-stroke technique, and I am using Dixie Belle's collard greens and Mermaid Tail for my colors. I felt the stems needed more of a dynamic, so using a dry brush technique, I am using Burlap to highlight the details in the WoodUbend. And why not? Let's add one more butterfly to our jewelry box. For my last step, I'm going to apply a little bit of the Boho Soul transfer from Dixie Belle. To do this, I cut out the portions of the transfer that I wanted to use, removed the protective backing off the transfer, applied it to my piece, and using the burnishing stick that comes in the tube, I am rubbing the transfer on while simultaneously removing the protective layer from the outer side of the transfer. Once I was done with my transfers, I went ahead and sealed this piece in entirety with Dixie Belle's Satin Clear Coat. I also, off camera, polished the hardware using Dixie Belle's Gold Gilding Wax. The entire process was pretty simple and fun, and really allowed me to express my creative side. Hint, this technique could absolutely be used on furniture. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and if you want to purchase any of these products, use the links in the description to do so. I'll see you guys next time.